5 months. That is all the time it took. Between August and December 2025, the First Azov Corps reported killing 12,492 Russian soldiers, wounding 8,346 more, and capturing 185 in a single direction on one section of the front. Those are the people. Now the hardware: 93 tanks, 259 armored fighting vehicles, 314 artillery pieces, all documented by the Institute for the Study of War. Russia disputes these numbers, which is exactly what you say when you have no better explanation for them. One corps, one direction, 5 months. To put that in perspective, NATO's entire eastern flank has roughly 30,000 troops permanently stationed across 8 countries. The unit we are talking about just processed more Russian casualties in 5 months than most NATO members have soldiers deployed to the entire Eastern Front. And here is Russia's official response to that unit. They call it a terrorist organization, which, when you think about it, is exactly what you say when you have run out of better answers. But the real story, the one that has NATO generals quietly rearranging their entire understanding of modern warfare, is not the kill count. It is what happened in Estonia. And what happened in Estonia explains everything about why Russia is afraid of this unit in a way they will never publicly admit. Stay with me, because this one goes deep. Let's set the scene properly, because the details matter. May 2025, Estonia, the Hedgehog exercise, one of the largest NATO war games in European history. 16,000 troops from 12 nations assembled to simulate a Russian invasion across Estonia's border with Russia. British Challenger 2 tanks rolling across Estonian fields. Apache attack helicopters on standby. HIMARS artillery batteries locked and loaded. The full spectrum of Western military hardware, operated by some of the best trained soldiers on Earth. NATO did not bring this equipment to look good in photographs. They brought it because this was supposed to be a serious stress test of exactly the kind of war Europe might one day have to fight. And then 10 Ukrainians showed up with drones. Not 10 battalions, not 10 platoons, 10 people. In half a day, they mock destroyed 17 armored vehicles and conducted 30 simulated strikes across the exercise area. By the end of the day, 2 entire NATO battalions had been rendered combat ineffective. The battle group, thousands of troops, including a full British brigade and an Estonian division, never located the Ukrainian drone teams. Not once. One NATO commander watching from the sidelines reportedly turned to the officer next to him and said 3 words.
"We are
Now let's be precise about what happened, because this is important. The Ukrainian team used a battlefield management system called Delta, a Ukrainian-built platform that fuses drone feeds, satellite imagery, and frontline intelligence into a single real-time interface. Detection to strike in 2.2 seconds. NATO had never seen it operate on their own soil before. The adversary force set up, identified the NATO formations, and began working methodically. One participant described what the NATO battle group looked like from the Ukrainian side. Their words, not mine. The troops were just walking around, not using any kind of disguise, parking tents and armored vehicles. All of it destroyed. Ivar Hanioti, who coordinated unmanned systems for the Estonian Defense League, described the overall result as horrible. Estonian officers called it alarming. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature. Retired U.S. General David Petraeus weighed in, noting that lessons are only truly learned when you rewrite doctrine, overhaul training, and rebuild procurement from scratch. That is not an assessment. That is a polite way of saying NATO just failed its own exam. Now here is the detail that makes all of this significantly worse. The drone density used during the Hedgehog exercise was a fraction of what Ukrainian units face on a normal day in Donetsk. A fraction. NATO faced a watered-down version of this battlefield and was still almost completely unprepared for it, which means if that exercise had used real Ukrainian frontline conditions, the result would not have been 2 battalions eliminated. It would have been significantly worse. Here is the uncomfortable part of the Hedgehog story that nobody in Western media fully addressed. NATO was shocked. Russia was not. Russia has been on the receiving end of this exact doctrine since 2022. They did not need a Wall Street Journal article to explain what Ukrainian drone warfare looks like. They have been living inside it, losing equipment to it every single day. adapting, counter-adapting, being out-adapted again. They moved jammers forward, switched from trucks to motorcycles, fragmented assault columns into smaller groups, deployed smoke, developed their own drone forces specifically designed to counter Ukrainian tactics. None of it solved the problem. By the end of 2025, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense reported that drones accounted for more than 80% of all confirmed enemy targets destroyed across the entire front. Not 80% of drone-specific engagements, 80% of everything: tanks, artillery, command posts, logistics vehicles, trucks. 819,737 video-verified hits logged in 2025 alone, each one confirmed with footage before it counts. 8 out of every 10. Azov's former chief of staff, Bogdan Krotevich, wrote the line that explains why adapting to this is so difficult. Ukrainian drones are not a revolution at the level of physics or materials. They are a revolution at the level of application, scaling, and adaptability. NATO spent decades thinking about drones as tools, sensors, helpers, precision add-ons bolted onto existing doctrine. Azov and Ukraine more broadly figured out that drones are not an addition to the battlefield. They are the battlefield. Everything else is built around them. That difference in philosophy is why 10 people embarrass 16,000 troops in Estonia. And it is precisely why Russia, despite 3 years of trying, cannot neutralize a unit that thinks this way. Now, here's the part of this story that is almost too ironic to say out loud. Russia's official justification for the 2022 invasion, stated by Putin on live television, was to denazify Ukraine. And the primary target of that campaign, the unit Russia specifically designated as a terrorist organization and publicly vowed to eliminate, was Azov. At the time of the invasion, Azov was a brigade, one brigade. Today, because of everything Russia did trying to destroy it, the Azov Corps is the first Azov Corps, Ukraine's first fully fledged Corps-level formation in the entire history of its armed forces. Created on April 15, 2025, 5 brigades: the Burovy Brigade, the Azov Brigade itself, the Chervona Kalina Brigade, the Karadog Brigade, and the Lyubart Brigade, all under one command, operating simultaneously across the Kupiansk-Lyman axis, Kreminna in the north, Bakhmut in the center, Zaporizhzhia in the south. The commander is Brigadier General Denis Rytis Prokopenko, the youngest unit commander in the history of Ukraine's National Guard, a man Russia captured after Mariupol, held in captivity, interrogated for months, and then released in a prisoner exchange in 2023. He came home. His first public statement was 3 words: "I will return." He did. He took command of the corps that grew out of the unit Russia tried to erase. And in early 2026, a single industrial sponsor delivered a drone package to the corps worth over $15 million. Russia feared a regiment. They put that regiment through hell, and the regiment came out the other side as a corps with a drone budget that would make some small NATO members quietly uncomfortable. For context, NATO corps formations typically command between 20,000 and 45,000 troops. The First Azov Corps is not a symbolic structure. It is a functioning multi-brigade operational formation running active combat operations across multiple critical frontline sectors right now. Russia tried to erase a brigade. They got a corps. The propaganda made it famous. The fame brought attention. The attention brought resources. The resources built something bigger than what Russia started trying to destroy. That is the single most expensive own goal in this entire war. Back to those numbers from the beginning: 12,492 killed, 8,346 wounded, 185 captured, 93 tanks, 259 armored vehicles, 314 artillery pieces, 5 months, one direction. Those numbers are not just a kill count. They are a description of what a frontline looks like when one side has turned the entire operational environment into something the other side cannot navigate safely. But here is what the raw numbers do not tell you. Russian military planners do not just worry about Azov's kill count. They plan around Azov's location. In the Dobropilya salient in late 2025, Russian commanders committed an entire mechanized assault tanks, armored vehicles, bridging equipment, infantry to a secondary objective. Not to take ground, not to achieve a strategic goal, specifically to keep the First Azov Corps pinned in one sector so it could not redeploy to Pokrovsk, where Russia was making its main push. Russia used their own soldiers as bait, their own troops as a distraction, committed real men and real equipment to die in a supporting operation, purely to stop Azov from being somewhere else. Think about what that means. The unit you are fighting is so disruptive that you will sacrifice a separate battle just to keep it occupied. That is not how you treat a unit you are not afraid of. That is how you treat a unit whose presence alone changes the math of every operation in its vicinity. And the soldiers on the ground understand this. Russian commanders reportedly urge their troops to fight to the death rather than surrender specifically to Azov. That instruction exists because the psychological impact of facing Azov in a sector before a single shot is fired is already degrading Russian combat performance. Fear is not always visible in a battle report. Sometimes it shows up in a planning memo. Sometimes it shows up in what you sacrifice to prevent a redeployment. After Hedgehog, something started happening across NATO that does not show up in any press release. Western militaries stopped asking for white papers and think tank reports about Ukrainian drone warfare. They started asking for the actual operators, the people who had been running these systems under live Russian jamming against an enemy actively trying to kill them every single day for 3 years. Under programs like Operation Interflex, that transfer started happening. EW avoidance, FPV mission design, thermal interpretation, all of it built not in a classroom but in a war. The reaction from NATO personnel in these sessions was consistent, not "this is interesting, this is different, here is why." Every tactic Azov uses survived contact with an enemy trying to kill the person using it. Bad ideas got people killed and disappeared immediately. Good ideas got refined in days, not years. No training budget on Earth produces that filter. You cannot simulate it, you cannot purchase it, you can only earn it. And then there is the scale problem NATO has not solved. Ukraine produced 2.2 million drones in 2024. By 2025, that was 4.5 million. Analysts at Hedgehog calculated Estonia alone would need 200,000 drones per month in a real war just to match current Ukrainian frontline consumption. NATO is nowhere near that number. During one Hedgehog scenario, a single Estonian FPV drone eventually found a tank. The Ukrainians watching said by that point, 8 to 10 drones should already have been inbound, because one is almost never enough. That is not a hardware gap. That is a gap in how an entire alliance understands war. And the unit closing that gap, the unit now teaching NATO how the modern battlefield actually works, is the exact unit Russia spent years calling a terrorist organization. Russia's propaganda made Azov globally famous. That fame brought NATO attention. That attention brought observers to the front. Those observers went home and told their governments what they saw. And now the most powerful military alliance on Earth is learning warfare from the people Russia put in cages. The student became the teacher. Russia made that happen by trying to stop it. Let's be honest about what Russia's behavior reveals, because they are communicating something loudly through everything they refuse to say. Officially, Azov is a terrorist organization. Officially, it is a band of Nazis Russia is heroically fighting to eliminate. That is the Kremlin line, and they are sticking to it regardless of what the evidence says. But watch what Russia does, because behavior is more honest than press releases. Russia specifically targets Azov prisoners for the harshest treatment in captivity. Over 130 Azov fighters have been sentenced to 10 or more years in prison simply for being members of the unit. One recently released Azov officer Yan Danilko described losing a third of his body weight in captivity and recounted specific torture techniques by name. Russian commanders instruct their troops to fight to the death rather than be captured specifically by Azov, not because of ideology, but because Russian soldiers facing Azov in a sector are already operating at degraded morale before the first engagement begins. Russian state media covers Azov more than almost any other Ukrainian unit, more than formations 3 times its size, more than units directly threatening Russian-held cities. You do not dedicate that much attention attention to something you genuinely consider irrelevant. You do not torture prisoners from a unit you think is losing. You do not sacrifice a secondary operation to prevent a redeployment from a corps you are not afraid of. And you certainly do not build your invasion's entire propaganda justification around eliminating one brigade, and then watch that brigade become a corps while your own forces absorb losses that now require an entire separate disinformation campaign to explain away. Meanwhile, in February 2026, Azov hosted its own NATO technology conference in Kiev. Representatives from NATO member states flew in. Weapons developers presented directly to Corps Command. They called it Defense Technology Horizons 2026. A unit Russia designated as a terrorist organization in 2022 was hosting a NATO defense summit in 2026. If that is not the most complete reversal in the entire history of this war, it is at minimum in the top 3. Let's go back to where we started. A NATO commander, Estonia, May 2025, looking at a screen showing the results of what 10 Ukrainians with drones just did to 2 of his battalions in half a day. 3 words: we are fucked. He was not wrong about the problem. He was just late to understand it. Russia has understood that problem for 3 years. They have been living inside it, losing equipment to it, building entire operations around trying to contain it, torturing prisoners from it, calling it a terrorist organization because calling it what it actually is, the most effective drone warfare force on the European continent, would require admitting something that cannot appear in any official Kremlin statement. That the unit they invaded to destroy rewrote the rules of war. That NATO's most advanced militaries are now flying to learn from people Russia put in cages. That the core Russia accidentally created by trying to erase a brigade has become a problem so significant that Russian generals factor its position into operational planning before a single shot is fired. Putin called them Nazis. His generals call them something else. They call them the reason they change plans. And somewhere in a Russian command post in Donetsk tonight, an officer is looking at a map. He has just seen the latest intelligence on where the First Azov Corps is positioned. He looks at his staff, then he adjusts the plan. Not because headquarters ordered it, because experience taught him what happens when you don't. That is what fear looks like when it cannot say its own name.